Missile interceptors lit up the sky in Tel Aviv as Iran and Israel exchanged wave after wave of attacks throughout the night. 2 men were injured in the latest Iranian strike, but no casualties have been reported. Meanwhile, the Israeli military launched a wide-scale wave of strikes overnight. Iranian state media says 15 factory workers were killed in Iran. While several countries have been trying to mediate an end to the conflict, now in its third week, neither side appears open to the idea of a ceasefire. As U.S. President Donald Trump calls for allies to secure the Strait of Hormuz, he is threatening to launch further strikes on Iran's oil hub, Karg Island. Iranian officials have vowed to keep the strait closed, saying they would respond to any attack on energy facilities. For the latest on the conflict, Robert Pape joins me now. He's a professor of political science at the University of Chicago, previously served as an advisor to the West Wings of the White House. Nice to see you this morning.
Thank you very much.
I want to start with sort of where we're at this weekend, and that is both the Strait of Hormuz being used as leverage by Iran and the United States targeting Karg Island, an oil hub, on Friday. What does that tell you about the military strategy right now?
It tells us that the strategy by the United States has failed. Where we are leading into week 3 is that President Trump's plan for a quick and decisive victory has failed. We now see Iran more dangerous and more powerful than before the bombing. And now President Trump is reacting to this by doubling down, by escalating the war in a search for a victory. He doesn't know where it's going to be, but it's a search for victory. I call this the escalation trap. And I write a whole Substack about the logics, the histories. This history will treat this brutally. The cost will be paid by the world.
And you call it an escalation trap because there is no sense of where we're at with this or how the president will get out of it?
That's right. What everybody is sensing, including, I'm sure, in the administration, is there's no pathway to victory here. What we're doing is when you get caught, in history, when strong states attack smaller countries, we saw this in Vietnam, and then their plans don't work out, they think, rather than pull back or negotiate, they think that what they should do is double down, because after all, they're still the strong state. However, Iran is not Vietnam. Iran did not take the Strait of Hormuz. Iran was actually a pretty powerful state to begin with, and what they've done is taken over 20% of the world's oil. They've literally taken a chokehold on the world's oil.
Well, speak to me about what impact you think that would have, because that obviously is putting, or will put, an enormous amount of domestic pressure on the president. How will he respond to that, the domestic politics at play because of that?
Well, you can tell that how long the war goes on will determine the global economic shock and the domestic political shock. What we are learning when President Trump is moving Marines from Japan to the Persian Gulf, that takes weeks. Once they get there, it will be some period of time. He's planning already, this is going into May. So this may go into June, July, August, not just May. So what that means is that price of oil that you're seeing going up, that's going to go up probably till May at the minimum. The domestic political costs, they're going to be going up. And what's going to start to happen is, as we get into the summer, is the midterms. And this was what happened to Lyndon Johnson. In the spring of 2068, his party bailed on him, and they had no choice but to bail on him. And they still lost this 1968 national election in a landslide to Richard Nixon. So what we're seeing here is President Trump is becoming President Johnson.
What do you think the goal of the mission was or is? Because it seemed to be one thing, now it's another. It's clear that the regime is far more dug in or entrenched than perhaps the president understood. What do you think is the goal?
So on my Substack, The Escalation Trap, I do a 30-minute PowerPoint briefing laying all this out. Bottom line is they're trying to fix up the mess they left when they bombed the first time in June. You see, June didn't obliterate the nuclear program, or else we wouldn't be in this point. June didn't obliterate, and what did they do? The reason is they didn't get the enriched uranium. That is the core, the gold that has to be gotten here if you're going to have it stop the nuclear program. So what did Trump do over the summer and fall? He tried to negotiate. Well, after doing the bombing in June, that didn't work out. Now in February 28, he tries a regime change, which is, of course, a step to try to, how am I going to get out of this mess? They're now dispersing that enriched uranium inside the country. And as this goes on, they can disperse it outside the country. So this is really going to become quite a dangerous problem for the world. Right now, we're having an economic shock. We may, over the next few months, have a terrorism shock. There may be something coming with that dispersed nuclear material even further down the road. This really, he really has, with that Fordo bombing in June, here, he's unleashed the escalation trap, and that's why he's stuck in the escalation trap.
So was it a mistake to do this at all? Because, there are those who would argue that Iran is obviously a threat to the world in various ways. And the president and I think Prime Minister Netanyahu have both called for the Iranian people to rise up and take back their country.
So I've studied every air campaign in history. I've taught for the U.S. Air Force. I briefed the military regularly. I modeled the bombing of Iran for 20 years here. And every single time we bomb Fordo and Natanz, this is where you end up a year later, literally a year later. And that's why the escalation trap, and that's why my other writings seem so prescient. It's not really they're prescient. I've been modeling this for 20 years. We're right on schedule with the escalation trap, which is a disaster for the world.
So does that mean that in order for something to change here, the boots have to be on the ground, or what does it mean?
That we will have a ground power dilemma as yet another, and you're seeing this with the movement of the Marines, and I call it the ground power dilemma because it is, again, a search and escalation, searching for victory. There's no actual plan for victory here, you see. So you're searching for victory. So what you're doing is you're going through your list of strategies, and he's just going through them. And that's what I'm saying. I modeled this for 20 years. We're going through the list. There's a finite list of things to do, ma'am. And so this is not really, it may seem chaotic and so forth because the people are just not expecting it. But if you had studied this for 20 years and modeled it, the bombing and what would happen, you would see there's only so many things we can do, and we're just going through them, and none of them are working. So the problem was we shouldn't have bombed in June. That's the real problem here. And once we did that, this was always coming.
Robert Pape, what if he just walked away? What if he just said, this is as far as I'm going to go? He would obviously call it a victory because it's the president, and he just turned tail and walked away.
I think he lost that option about 10 days ago. So that was possible here. And the reason I think he's really stuck is because now to walk away, you've got to end the war to get Israel to stop bombing and killing leaders, Russia to stop giving military intelligence to Iran, and somehow you got to persuade Iran to give you back the Strait of Hormuz. Well, I don't think they're giving it back. You see what I mean? If anything, they want to hold it tight, at least through the midterms, to bring President Trump down. That's what I think this is. They have the Vietnamese strategy here. We've seen this strategy of long war before. Now the details, of course, are different, but nonetheless, they're following a tried and true way for a weak power to wreck America. The difference between this and Vietnam is they're also wrecking the global economy.
Robert Pape, I am a fan of your Substack, so thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate it very much.
Thank you for having me.
The Gulf region is also a major supplier of fertilizer, with 1/3 of the world's nitrogen passing through the sea channel. That's causing a surge in fertilizer costs in this country as the price farmers pay is set by international markets. Bill Prybylski runs his family farm in Willowbrook, Saskatchewan, and we've talked to him before about other challenges as a farmer. Bill, nice to see you this morning.
Thank you. Good morning.
Tell me, what is the impact you're seeing right now on fertilizer prices?
Oh, we've seen a dramatic rise in fertilizer prices over the last couple of weeks. It's very significant.
Give me a sense. I have no idea what fertilizer costs. Give me a sense of what you've seen specifically.
Sure. So on my farm, we use UAN. It's a liquid form of nitrogen. In the fall, we were paying $464 a ton. As I checked a few days ago, it's up it's up to $675 a ton. So on my farm, we use about 1,300 tons a year. So that translates into roughly $275,000 additional cost to my farm.
Wow. So how do you deal with that kind of pressure?
Well, there's a few things. Fortunately, we were able to buy some fertilizer earlier in the fall and store it on the farm. That's not the case for a lot of producers that don't have the capacity to store their fertilizer. But fortunately, we were able to store some. And then, some of the things we could be looking at in the spring is possible cropping decisions will have to be made. Go away from some high fertilizer use crops like corn or in our case canola. We may be looking at reduced acres and convert to things like peas that use significantly less fertilizer.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Is there another option? Is there another place where you can get it? What is the market like in terms of whether there's something that works as well as what you're using right now?
Yeah, I guess that's the frustrating part from producers around Saskatchewan in particular, because the majority of the fertilizer or the nitrogen fertilizer that we use is produced locally, but it's priced internationally. So even though it's only coming from just down the highway, we're still paying an international price. So we really can't do anything about the price. It's just a matter of how much fertilizer we ultimately decide to use. So there may be some producers that look at just cutting back on the amount they use. They may leave some acres in fallow and not seed a crop just because they can't afford to pay these really high fertilizer prices.
The last time we talked was when China was reducing tariffs on canola, and you at the time said it was giving hope to farmers who've been, again, facing one crisis after another, really just constant pressure points. How are you feeling now? Like you got over that one thing and now you're facing this issue.
Yeah, it's just another in a long line of frustrations between, obviously the weather is something we deal with all the time every year. Sure. The government red tape and, things with COVID and supply chain issues and labor disruptions and the tariffs with China. We, kind of had a partial solution and now this. So there's a real feeling of frustration in the farming community and all of these issues are out of our control, but yet they have a significant impact on our farms.
So what do you need for support or help? Is there something, if this drags out, as long as our previous guest said, that could create all sorts of problems for not just you, but other farmers as well. What kind of support would be needed?
Well, there are some government programs in place that will ultimately, hopefully keep guys in the business and we'll be able to farm again another year. But those programs are quite often slow to react and in most cases are insufficient to really cover the hurt that farmers are going to be facing. So, farmers are going to have some tough decisions to make in the next coming months. We're in some cases a few weeks to a month away from getting into seeding. Yeah, there's going to be some tough decisions made going forward.
Have you made those decisions yet, Bill, or are you still going to wait it out a little longer?
Yeah, we're gonna wait a little bit on our farm. We haven't made any changes to our rotation or our fertilizer needs at this point, but that's certainly on the table. And I know things like investment in newer or better equipment is something that's probably going to have to be delayed until a later date once we see how this all shakes out.
Well, thank you for all the work you're doing there, Bill. I tell you, it is a challenging time to be a farmer on any day, but particularly right now. Thanks so much for telling us about it.
You're very welcome.
Bill Prybylski is a farmer and president of the Agriculture Producers Association of Saskatchewan. Thanks for getting up so early for us, Bill. As Iran escalates attacks in the Strait of Hormuz, the U.S. says it's confident it will be able to get ships moving again. U.S. President Donald Trump is urging several nations, including the U.K., France, and China, to join him in sending ships to keep the key shipping channel open and safe. But with the strait still closed, Canada is trying to help to ease the global increase in oil prices.
We are low-risk producers of oil. We are low-risk producers of natural gas. We're reliable. We can produce. We're in jurisdictions where what we produce will go to market, and we can deliver it to market. And that is a contribution in a world which has lost, in effect, in the oil case, 15% potentially, some buffer on that of its oil flow, and 20% of its natural gas flow.
Canada has pledged to release 23.6 million oil barrels under the International Energy Agency Release Plan. The IEA, made up of 32 member countries, has committed to releasing 400 million barrels of oil. That's the biggest increase in history and more than double the nearly 183 it unlocked after Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022. Corey Hogan is the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Energy and Natural Resources, and he joins me from Alberta. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Thanks for making the time. So Minister Hodgson said that Canada is going to release this just over 23 million barrels of Canadian oil. How do we do that? How does Canada increase capacity?
Yeah, as a producer, what it means is we coordinate with the provinces, we coordinate with the companies that drill the oil, and we coordinate with the midstream companies that ship the oil, and we say, what's our capacity? What can we do? And Canada has been increasing oil and gas production and exports over the past bit. So what we're talking about is ramping up work that's already been in progress.
So is it making things move faster? Is it it's increasing capacity to Tidewater? Just break it down a little bit more for us if you can.
You bet. There's a lot of optimizations the oil and gas sector can do. I won't get too deep in the technical weeds, but for example, when the temperature heats up, you don't need as much what's called diluent in the pipelines. So you're able to ship more oil through existing infrastructure. You can optimize those pipelines further by making pumping stations move a little bit faster. You can take forward production. You can make sure that any planned what we'd call turnaround, where something goes offline, doesn't go offline as quickly.
Right.
And by pulling all of these levers, we're able to increase our production faster than anticipated, because I really want to underline we are increasing production naturally anyhow.
Okay, I guess another question Canadians might have, Mr. Hogan, is why don't we just do that all the time so that we are at maximum capacity all the time?
Well, I mean, obviously, we don't want to not do proper maintenance on our plants, so that's the turnaround one. In terms of the, the weather will help us with the diluent one, but you've got kind of a nameplate volume of a pipeline, and so you want to stick closer to that because you don't want to be having peaks and valleys. And what, as we've seen, even with this war, right? Demand is fairly constant at different times, and production wants to be optimized so you get the most out of wells long term, not just at any individual moment. And also, frankly, it requires a certain amount of coordination, which the companies aren't allowed to do themselves. It requires the government to be involved.
Okay, you talked about maintenance. I believe we are entering a maintenance period for Alberta's oil sands that could cut the second quarter output. Have you had conversations about delaying that now?
Well, I haven't had conversations personally about that, but the department is working with companies and seeing what's possible.
Okay. Canada, as you know, is the only G7 nation that doesn't have an oil reserve because it's a net exporter of oil. It's not required to. The U.S., though, does. Are we now looking at the idea of keeping some?
Well, if by keeping some you mean holding back our exports to the United States, no. I mean, we have a very integrated oil and gas sector in North America. We export to the United States significantly. We also import a fair bit from the United States. So we want to make sure we're coordinated in all of those things. Obviously, Canada exports much more than the United States.
Yes.
But we want to make sure that there's a functioning oil market overall.
But is there no benefit to having a reserve if the United States feels that there is for them, even though they also are a net exporter? Why wouldn't we not do that?
Well, it's important to keep in mind Canada produces something like 3 times what we require. So when we talk about the need for a reserve in the G7, there's no need on the Canadian side. I think when people imagine reserves, they picture like a tank that you just turn a spigot on. But the U.S. reserve, for example, is in like an underground cavern. It's in a salt mine, and it's faster certainly than pumping, but we don't need what is essentially a fast well because we have wells. We produce so much. So when we look at what may come and what the future holds, of course we have a lot of optionality as a major energy producer, but we're not looking to upset major markets like that. We need stability in the markets right now, and Canada can be a stabilizing force. That's what the Prime Minister was talking about.
One of the things that the United States has also decided to do is to ease some sanctions on Russian oil. The UK, France, other European countries have criticized that move. What is Canada's position?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, that's not something that we're following on. The reality is Russia has been one of the biggest sources of destabilization. And when you talk about, the policy intent of the U.S. president, which is to ease prices at the pump, I get that. And everybody wants lower prices at the pump. But let's be clear, the kind of instability we're seeing in the war in Ukraine, the war in Iran, those are increasing prices at the pump far, far more than most anything else you can imagine. So I think in the long term, we need to make sure that sanctions are maintained on Russia and that Russia is held to account for its actions.
Well, the gas prices are expected to spike again this week. This could go on a lot longer than anyone perhaps expected. Is there any kind of relief that the federal government is considering in terms of perhaps a rebate, some one-time payment for Canadians?
The primary relief that the federal government has at hand is making sure that the oil and gas sector globally is stable. And these price spikes, this instability that is happening across the world, that is what's driving the prices. And so the way to get out of those prices is not Band-Aids. It is to make sure we are making the world oil market as stable as possible. Now, we're very lucky as Canadians. We have the capacity to really meaningfully contribute to that. But that's where our focus is right now.
Sure, but one of the benefits of a high oil price means that government coffers will fill up. So my question is, would you consider using some of that to help Canadians through a difficult period?
Yeah, I mean, early days, you don't want to get ahead of some of that stuff. Hopefully things resolve themselves more quickly. But we're always looking for pragmatic ways that we can support Canadians at the pocketbook, whether it's by cutting taxes, eliminating the consumer carbon tax. But this is 2 weeks and change into this particular movement in Iran. We need to see where this all goes.
What about opportunity here for Canada? You're talking about a stable oil market, making sure Canada uses the capacity we have. Does this sort of make the case for another pipeline to Tidewater?
Yeah, listen, I'm an Albertan. I think that case was already made in many ways. That's why we have an MOU with Alberta to get a West Coast pipeline tied with strong climate action. But there are a lot of other things that we can do in order to expand capacity. And we have been. As I mentioned, we're already at, record capacity, record production across the country right now. And that continues to grow. It's expected to grow by another 100,000 barrels per day or more in the next year. So we're already on that path, but I think by being a reasonable producer, by being a producer that is creating a future-proof product that is also lower carbon, we're going to be in great shape for those kinds of things, and that's the work that's underway right now. Well,
does part of that, and this will be my last question, does part of that speak to what the Prime Minister talked about there, marketing Canadian oil in a different way so that it is reliable, that people understand where it's coming from and how easy it is to get? And is that, as your boss, Minister Hodgson, has said, is that argument starting to resonate in a different way for people right now?
Well, I think for a lot of us, that argument has always resonated, and this new government is looking at these things a little bit differently and trying to make sure that we are optimizing all of Canada's advantages in this more dangerous world, being that pragmatic middle power that is going to push forward. But yeah, I mean, we are a source of stability in the world, and we should absolutely make sure we are maintaining that as a competitive advantage. We also build things in a socially responsible way. We have climate action that's very meaningful. We've reduced our emissions by 6% since 2015. We did that while increasing our oil and gas production 34%. I mean, there's no other precedent in the world. So we've got a lot of advantages as a country. We need to push on them.
Okay, Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Energy and Natural Resources. I didn't mean to imply the minister was your boss. Of course, you're your own man, Corey Hogan.
Thank you.
Thanks for the time. Appreciate you getting up early. With the price of oil continuing to rise, business leaders are calling for Canada to seize the opportunities we were just talking about there. They want to see increased movement on pipelines to more markets, including now talk of a revival of the ill-fated Keystone XL pipeline extension. Adam Waterous is the executive chairman of Strathcona Resources, an Alberta energy company, and I spoke to him earlier about the need for more oil infrastructure. Adam Waterous, thanks for joining me again. Nice to see you.
Rosemary.
I have a bunch of questions for you, given the state of the world right now, but I will start with the revival or the idea of the Keystone project, the Keystone XL pipeline project again. We know, in fact, it was me who reported that the Prime Minister raised it with the President in one of their meetings. Do you think that this project, or why do you think this project could be used for leverage in CUSMA negotiations?
Rosemary, there's a easy way to be raised, and then there's kind of maybe the harder part. The easy is obviously Donald Trump is a mercurial guy, often described as difficult to negotiate with, hard to figure out what he wants. But one thing that Donald Trump has been crystal clear on for 10 plus years is the only thing he wants from Canada is Keystone XL. more generically, more oil from Canada. He campaigned on this in the primaries in 2015, and he's never deviated from it. And by the way, why is that? Well, the United States is short oil. So while it produces about 13 million barrels a day, it actually consumes about 20 million barrels a day. It's net short about 6 or 7 million barrels a day. 4 million barrels a day it currently gets from Canada, and it wants to get more. Particularly wants to get more because that 13 million barrels a day, which has been flat for about 6 years, is about to start declining. So it's an acute challenge for Donald Trump, and that the economic hard power that we possess can obviously be used as a negotiating tool to be able to protect other industries like steel, autos, and aluminums in the CUSMA negotiations. The oil and gas industry has been clear for a very long time, a couple of decades, that it wants to diversify away from the United States. The United States is a great customer. It's been a long time great customer for Canada. Will continue to be a great customer, but sometimes, you can have too much of a good thing. And that's why the industry 2 decades ago said we have to start diversifying. And that's why there were 3 pipeline proposals to Tidewater, starting decades ago, Northern Gateway, Trans Mountain, and of course Energy East. Only one of them got built. And so the industry, generally speaking, wants to get incremental pipeline capacity to the Tidewater, generally to the BC coast.
I'll interrupt you just for a second, Adam. Obviously this is something that the Prime Minister and the Premier of Alberta are talking about in relation to the Major National Projects Office. Do you get the impression that this is a real thing? Are you willing to put money behind it? Do you think the Prime Minister wants this to happen?
Well, I don't want to. I can't get inside the head of the Prime Minister. I don't want to speak for him. If I was at the negotiating table, it is the overwhelmingly dominant chip that Canada has to play. I mean, you can't see second place behind this. This is the overwhelmingly what we can offer. So and that's how I'd be thinking about it, certainly if I was the Prime Minister. I think that. As I said, the challenge is industry. Industry's all in favor of growing. Industry's all in favor of more pipelines, but the pipelines that the industry is looking for, generally speaking, is to the West Coast. Diversify. Yeah. Meaning, so that's kind of the dominant. And importantly, how these pipelines work, as you know, the industry has to commit to them volumes so that they can have the economics to actually be built. And so it's quite difficult to build these pipelines without industry support. Yeah. Now, having said that, my own view is this is a national challenge in dealing with tariffs with the United States, particularly steel, autos, and aluminum. And every industry needs to try and do its part to try and be helpful.
Tell me, as you watch, this is sort of adjacent to what we're talking about, but as you watch the conflict in Iran continue, you watch the price of oil go up, and a desire by the rest of the world, and they are going to release some of oil reserves, of which Canada doesn't have any. Do you get the impression that Canadian markets are doing enough to take advantage of these inflated prices, or make sure that what we have gets to the right places?
So, as you just identified yourself, Rosemary, there's no spare capacity in Canada. Like every barrel that can be brought on is on. It is very marginal what can be done in the short run to be able to increase production, and to be able to help address a shortage in oil in the world in the short run. There's very little Canada can do. Now, in the long run, there's a lot what can be done, and I think that one of the biggest impacts in the long run of this war in Iran is an even greater pressure on the United States to be able to diversify its source of supply away from the Middle East. meaning it still gets some of its shortage from the Middle East. And this is obviously just a very clear indication that that is an unstable source and puts even a greater desire, if I'm Donald Trump, to actually end up having more oil coming from Canada.
Adam Waterous, it's always nice of you and nice of you to make the time. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for your time.